Hi guys, so today we're going to solve a couple of quadratic inequalities. You'll notice that it's this type if there's a less than or greater than or less than or equal to or greater than or equal to sign in the problem, and then you have a quadratic. One side has to be 0 in order to do these, so this is all ready to go, this first problem, because it's less than 0. So the first step is to factor. So if we look at this first problem, what would multiply to 32 and add up to negative 12? Well, the two numbers that would do that are negative 4 and negative 8. So then I can put those into my factors, x minus 4, x minus 8. Now, if we find the solutions where it would equal 0, that's our next step. So we set these two things equal to 0. So I'm going to get x equals 4 and x equals 8. Okay, now the next step in these problems is I would make a number line. There are a few different ways to do this, but I'm going to show you one way. So if you make a number line and put the 4 and the 8 onto it, then what you're going to do is you're going to pick a number from each of these three sections. So pick a number from each section. And then what we're going to do is plug it back in. The easiest place is to plug your numbers back in here and here instead of into the original. Okay, so let's try to pick the easiest numbers possible here. For this section, why don't we pick a 3? Here we could pick a 5, and maybe over here we could pick a 9. So I'm going to plug each one of those numbers in, 3, 5, and 9. Alright, so I'm plugging them back into where I highlighted, so 3 minus 4 times 3 minus 8 equals negative 1 times negative 5, which equals 5. Now all we care about is if it comes out positive or negative. So this is positive. So I'm just going to write a plus sign in that section that had the 3. Now I'm going to do exactly the same thing with 5. 5 minus 4 times 5 minus 8, which equals 1 times negative 3, which is negative 3. So that's a negative. So I record a negative in that section of the number line. And then finally with 9, 9 minus 4 times 9 minus 8 gives me 5 times 1, 5. And so again, that's a positive. So I record a positive right there. All right, now I'm just going to erase a few of these notes down here. So we did the picking. I'm going to erase the numbers that we picked so that it looks like this now. So what this tells us is, if you look back at the original equation, it had said less than 0. When it says that, less than 0 means that we want the negatives. All right, so that means on the number line, we want this part that came out negative. And so this is going to be our solution. The part that we want is in the middle. So when the part we want is in the middle, you're going to always write it as the smallest number less than x less than the largest number. which means for us it's going to be 4 is less than x is less than 8. That just means that x is between 4 and 8. And since our original problem did not have an equal sign, these answers, like right here and here, I will not put that because our original problem did not have equal signs. So this would just be our final answer. Okay, so now we're going to try this second one. Now, like I said before, we need to have 0 on one side. So we need 0 on one side. So my first job here is to subtract 8 from both sides. So I get 2x squared plus 15x minus 8 is greater than or equal to 0. So now the second step is to factor. All right, so we need to have something that multiplies to negative 16 and adds up to 15. This is the same way I factored in one of the earlier videos. It's when you take the leading coefficient times the last number. That's how I got negative 16, because I did 2 times negative 8 to get that number. And then you're trying to add up to the middle number. So let's see, the two numbers that would do that would be 16 and negative 1. So now I'm going to split the middle term. So the way that I'm factoring, the method is called splitting the middle term. And you can look back at one of my earlier videos that was called factoring, and it'll show you that whole method. But here's what we do. 2x squared plus our two numbers that we came up with, so plus 16x minus 1x minus 8 greater than or equal to 0. Then you group like that and pull it out, the GCF. So I'm going to take out a 2x from the first parenthesis and a negative 1 from the second parenthesis, which leaves me with x plus 8 in both. So overall, I rewrite this as 2x minus 1 and x plus 8. And then I set both of these equal to 0 to find the solutions. So I'm going to be getting x equals 1/2 and x equals negative 8. Now I draw my number line, just like in the first problem. 1/2, well, let's see, negative 8 is smaller and 1/2 is larger. So now I'm going to pick a number in each section. I think I'll pick negative 9, and in between I will pick 0, that'll be the easiest, and then I'll pick a 1 for the right hand side. And then remember, plug those test numbers back in to where you factored. It's just easier, you get smaller numbers, so you end up not really needing a calculator. So if I plug in negative 9, I'm going to have 2 times negative 9 minus 1, and then negative 9 plus 8, which is negative 19 times negative 1, which is 19. So that came out positive. So that's negative 9, which is in this section of my number line, so I just record the positive right there. Then I'm going to plug in 0, and so that gives me negative 1 times 8, which is negative 8, so that overall is a negative, and that was 0, so that's in the middle section of my number line. And then I'm going to plug in 1, and that gives me 1 times 9, which is 9, which is a positive. So in that section of the number line, my answers would be positive. Okay, now, if we look back at the original problem, I'll highlight this. The part where we had 0 on one side, it said greater than or equal to 0. Well, when it says that, that means you want the positives, because numbers that are greater than 0 are positive numbers. So anywhere on our number line where the answers came out positive, those would be the solutions. Now those are on the edges of the number line, so when your answers are the edges of the number line, you would write, it ends up being x is less than or equal to -8, or x is greater than or equal to 1/2. The reason I included the equals is because my original equation had an equals. It was greater than or equal to 0. So if it has it in the original, you include it in the answer. If it doesn't have that in the original, you don't include that in your answer. And the last thing to mention is that if your quadratic doesn't factor, like we did here, you would have to use the quadratic formula to come up with the two numbers. They rarely do that in these books. Most of the problems that I see always factor. So we're not going to do an example of that, but if you come across one and you just can't factor it, go ahead and use the quadratic formula. Chances are the answers will come out nicely anyway. You probably just got stuck when you were trying to factor. And then you would do the problem the same way with putting the numbers on the number line and testing points in each section of the number line. And that's it, so I hope that helps.